first noticed it during a Monday morning stand-up, the kind where everyone pretends they're awake while clutching coffee like it's life support. I was half listening to our manager ramble about deadlines when that familiar prickle crept up my spine, the feeling of being watched. Not casually, not accidentally, intentionally. I glanced up, expecting to catch someone zoning out in my direction. Instead, I locked eyes with Adam. He didn't look away. That was the part that stuck with me. Adam sat 2 rows over from me, same department, different team. We'd exchanged maybe a dozen words total since he'd joined the company 3 months ago. Polite hellos, awkward nods near the printer. Nothing memorable. He was quiet, observant, the kind of guy you don't really notice until you suddenly do. When our eyes met, he held my gaze for a second longer than what felt normal. Then, slowly, like he didn't want anyone else to notice, he looked back down at his laptop. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was nothing, just coincidence. I was tired, paranoid, maybe projecting. But once you notice something like that, it's impossible to unsee it. The rest of the day, I kept catching him in my peripheral vision, in the reflection of my monitor, across the break room, standing a little too still behind me while I waited for the microwave. Every time I looked directly at him, he'd already shifted his focus somewhere else, like he was always half a second ahead of me. It was subtle enough that I couldn't call it out, but obvious enough that my body reacted before my brain could rationalize it away. By Wednesday, I was sure of it. Adam was watching me, not in a creepy, over-the-top way. Nothing dramatic. I started paying attention to details I'd ignored before. The way he always seemed to know when I was about to stand up from my desk. How he'd appear in the kitchen within seconds of me grabbing my mug. The fact that he never used his phone during lunch but somehow always knew when I ate alone. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Work stress does weird things to your head. But then something happened that made it impossible to ignore. It was late Thursday afternoon. Most of the office had already cleared out. That quiet hour where the lights feel too bright and every sound echoes. I was alone in the small conference room, finishing up a report before heading home. The glass door was half open. I felt it again, that pressure, that awareness. I looked up. Adam was standing in the hallway just outside the room. Not walking past, not pretending to head somewhere. Just standing there, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on me through the glass. This time, he didn't look away. Neither did I. The silence stretched. My heartbeat felt loud in my ears. There was something unreadable on his face, not blank, not friendly, intent, focused, like he'd been caught, but didn't regret it. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Sorry," he said quietly. Didn't mean to stare. The words didn't match his tone. I swallowed. "It's fine." Another pause. He nodded once, then walked away down the hall like nothing had happened. I sat there for a full minute after that, staring at my screen without seeing a single word. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the moment over and over. The way he'd looked at me, and the worst part, I wasn't sure if what I felt was discomfort or curiosity. The next morning, Adam stopped by my desk for the first time ever. "Hey, Eric," he said, voice low, steady. "You free for a coffee later?" I looked up at him, really looked this time, close enough to notice the faint tiredness under his eyes. The way his jaw tightened like he was bracing himself for my answer. "Yeah," I heard myself say. "Sure." He smiled, just slightly, and as he walked away, I realized something that made my chest tighten even more than before. Whatever was going on between us hadn't started this week. I had just finally noticed it. That coffee invite sat with me the entire morning like an unread notification I couldn't swipe away. I tried to focus on work, but every time my screen dimmed or I leaned back in my chair, I felt it again, that awareness. Adam wasn't staring constantly. That was the thing. He didn't need to. It was like he already knew where I was, what I was doing, without looking. Around 11, I caught him laughing with someone from accounting. The sound surprised me. I'd never heard him laugh before. It was low, brief, like he wasn't used to letting it out. For a second, he looked normal, approachable, and that somehow made everything feel more unsettling, not less. When noon rolled around, I grabbed my jacket and headed for the elevator before I could overthink it. Adam was already there. Of course he was. "Hey," he said, like this was the most casual thing in the world. "Hey," I replied, trying not to sound too aware of the way my pulse jumped. We rode down in silence. The elevator music hummed awkwardly above us. When the doors opened, he gestured toward the Coworker across the street. "Hope that's okay," he said. "It's quieter." I nodded. "Yeah, that's fine." Inside, we ordered, then found a small table near the window. Sunlight hit his face at an angle that made me notice details I hadn't before: the faint scar near his eyebrow, the way his eyes flicked to me and then away, like he was measuring how much to reveal. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "So," I finally said, forcing a light tone, "you wanted coffee?" He smiled again, that same restrained smile. "I wanted to talk to you." There it was. "About?" I prompted. Adam wrapped his hands around his cup, staring into it like the answer might be floating on the surface. "You probably think I'm weird." I almost laughed. Almost. "That's one way to start a conversation." He exhaled, a quiet breath. "I know I've been paying attention. More than I should." My chest tightened. "You have." He looked up then, really looked at me. No deflection this time. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." The word hung between us. "Then why do it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. His jaw flexed. "Because I'm bad at pretending not to notice things that matter to me." That sent a chill straight down my spine. "Eric," he added, saying my name carefully. "This isn't about control or obsession. I just notice you, the way you react to people, the way you leave your desk when you're stressed, the fact that you always take the long way back from the printer." I stared at him. "You memorized my habits." He shrugged, almost apologetic. "I pay attention." A dozen red flags flashed in my head. And yet, beneath the unease, there was something else, something dangerously close to being seen. "You could have just talked to me," I said quietly. "I wanted to," he replied. "But every time I thought about it, I was afraid I'd say too much." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "And now I already crossed the line," he said simply. "So I figured honesty was better than pretending." Outside, someone laughed. Car passed. The world kept moving like nothing significant was happening, while my insides felt completely off balance. "Do you do this with everyone?" I asked. His answer was immediate. "No." That was somehow the most unsettling part. I should have ended it there. Should have set boundaries. Should have told him this wasn't okay. Instead, I asked, "Since when?" Adam hesitated. Then, quietly, "Since your first week here." My breath caught. "That long?" "You dropped your badge in the hallway," he said. "You didn't notice. I picked it up and chased after you. You thanked me, smiled, and went back to complaining about the coffee machine like we'd known each other for years." I remembered that moment. Barely. It had meant nothing to me. Apparently, it had meant everything to him. "I don't expect anything from you," he added quickly. "I just needed you to know. And if you want me to back off completely, I will." I studied his face, looking for manipulation, for calculation. What I saw instead was restraint, tension, someone holding himself very carefully in place. "Let's start with this," I said slowly. "No more watching me from across rooms." He nodded instantly. "Agreed. And if you want to know something about me," I continued, "you ask." A pause. Then, "Okay." We sat there a moment longer, the air thick with everything unsaid. As we stood to leave, Adam glanced at me and said, "For what it's worth, I like what I see when I look at you." It should have made me uncomfortable. Instead, walking back into the office beside him, I realized my problem wasn't that Adam had been watching me. It was that part of me was already wondering what would happen if I let him keep doing it. After that coffee, things didn't go back to normal. They got quieter. Adam kept his word. No obvious staring. No lingering in doorways. No appearing out of nowhere like he'd been tracking my movements. If I hadn't known what I knew now, I might have thought I'd imagined the whole thing. But the awareness between us, that only sharpened. We passed each other in hallways with a kind of careful politeness, like two people who had shared a secret and weren't sure what to do with it yet. Sometimes our eyes met, just briefly, and something unspoken flickered there. Recognition, curiosity, restraint. I hated how much I thought about him, I caught myself noticing stupid things, how his shirts always fit just a little too well across his shoulders, how he smelled faintly of clean soap and coffee, how his voice dropped half an octave when he was focused. Things I had no business cataloging about a coworker. By Friday, the tension had settled into my body like a low hum. Late afternoon rolled around, and an email popped up from my manager asking if I could help Adam finish a report before end of day. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, my finger hovering over the mouse. Of course, the universe had a sense of humor. Adam's desk was near the windows, the late light turning everything warm and soft. He looked up when I approached, surprise flickering across his face before he smoothed it away. "Hey," he said. "Hey, apparently we're a team now." He nodded, scooting his chair back. "I won't make this weird." I snorted quietly. That ship sailed. For the next hour, we worked side by side, comparing notes, editing charts. It was easy. Too easy. We slipped into a rhythm that felt natural, finishing each other's thoughts, catching mistakes without pointing them out. At one point, our hands brushed as we reached for the same page. We both froze. "Sorry," he said at the same time I did. We laughed soft, awkward, and the sound broke something open. "You ever notice," I said, before I could stop myself, "that we're better at pretending nothing's happening than actually ignoring it?" Adam glanced at me, then back to the screen. "Yeah, a beat. I'm trying not to cross lines," he added. "I know." Another pause, longer this time. "But," he asked gently. I exhaled. "But pretending I don't feel it doesn't make it go away." That made him look at me again. Really look at me. "Feel what?" he asked. I swallowed. "This." The word felt fragile between us. The office was nearly empty now. The hum of computers, the distant clatter of an elevator. Adam leaned back in his chair, studying me with that same intent focus, but this time, there was permission in it. Or at least possibility. "I don't want to pressure you," he said quietly. "You're in control here." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" A corner of his mouth lifted. "More than you think." Something about that, about him offering control instead of taking it, made my chest tighten. "Walk me out," I asked suddenly. His eyes widened just a fraction. Then he nodded. "Yeah, okay." We left together, side by side, neither of us touching but both acutely aware of the inches between us. Outside, the air was cool, the sky fading into dusk. At the corner where we'd part ways, we stopped. "This is usually where people say goodnight and go home," I said. "Yeah," he replied. "Usually." Silence stretched again. Not awkward, charged. "Eric," Adam said softly, "if you want this to stay at work, I'll respect that. And if I don't?" His breath hitched just barely. "Then I'd like to see where it goes." I searched his face for hesitation, for doubt. I found none. "Text me," I said. His eyes flicked up, surprised. "You sure?" I nodded. "Yeah, I am." He took out his phone, hand steady, and we exchanged numbers. When my phone buzzed a second later, my heart jumped. Adam smiled this time, unrestrained. "Good night, Eric." "Good night, Adam." Walking home, my phone warm in my pocket, I realized something that unsettled me in a completely different way than before. Adam hadn't been watching me because he wanted power over me. He'd been watching because he'd been waiting. And now that I'd stepped closer instead of backing away, I wasn't sure which of us was more exposed. Adam texted me 10 minutes after we parted. "Adam, home safe?" I stared at the screen longer than necessary, thumb hovering, heart doing something embarrassingly close to flipping over. "Me, yeah, just got in." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Adam, good." That was it. One word. Somehow enough to keep me awake half the night. I told myself not to read into it, not to spiral. But my brain kept replaying the way he'd looked at me when I said, "Text me." Like he'd been holding his breath for weeks and had finally let himself exhale. The next morning, I woke up to another message. "Adam, can I ask you something?" I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling. "Me depends." A pause. "Adam, did I misread you yesterday?" That stopped me. I sat up in bed. "Me, no." This time, the 3 dots stayed longer. "Adam, okay. I just needed to hear that." I smiled despite myself. At work, things shifted again but subtly. Adam didn't suddenly act familiar or flirty. If anything, he was more careful than before. Professional, polite, almost distant. But now, when our eyes met, there was warmth there. Intent. Something agreed upon. At lunch, I caught him looking at me, not watching, not studying. Just looking. And when I raised an eyebrow, he smiled and went back to his food. That smile stayed with me all afternoon. Around 4, my phone buzzed. Adam, do you want to get out of here after work? Nothing big. Just a drink. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because I did. Me, yeah. One drink. Adam, I'll take that. We ended up at a quiet bar a few blocks away. Dim lighting. Low music. The kind of place where conversations felt private even when they weren't. We sat at the bar, close enough that our knees almost touched. Almost. So, I said, taking a sip, you always this patient? He glanced at me, amused. Only when something matters. Careful, I said. That's dangerously close to flirting. He smiled into his glass. Is it working? I felt heat creep up my neck. Maybe. We talked about work, about dumb office politics, about music. Normal things. Easy things. Every now and then, there'd be a pause where the conversation thinned out, and the awareness rushed back in. At one point, he leaned closer so I could hear him over the music. His arm brushed mine. This time, neither of us moved away. You okay? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said. I would have said something. I know, he replied. There was trust in that. Small but real. When we left the bar, it was dark out. The streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk. We walked in the same direction for a block before slowing to a stop. This is me, I said. He nodded. Same. We stood there, neither of us making the move to leave. Eric, he said, voice lower now. I need to ask you something, and you can say no. Okay. Can I kiss you? The question hit harder than if he'd just done it. My chest felt tight. Not with fear. With choice. Yes, I said. He didn't rush it. He stepped closer, gave me time to change my mind. When his hand came up, it hovered near my jaw for half a second before touching me. Like he was still checking for permission. Then he kissed me. Okay, I said quietly. So that happened. He laughed softly. Yeah. I expected him to pull away. He didn't. Can I walk you the rest of the way? He asked. I nodded. At my door, he stopped again. This doesn't have to move fast, he said. We can take it at whatever pace you want. I looked at him, really looked at him. Do you always say the right thing? I asked. No, he said honestly. I just try not to say the wrong one. I hesitated only a second before opening the door. Do you want to come in? His eyes darkened but his voice stayed calm. Only if you're sure. I am. Inside, the apartment was quiet, the city humming faintly outside. We stood near the door, shoes still on, like neither of us quite knew where to put ourselves. You're thinking, he said softly. I usually am. Is it a good thought or a bad one? I smiled faintly. Complicated. He nodded like he understood that answer better than most. Then we don't have to solve it tonight. Something about that, about him not pushing, not trying to turn this into something it didn't need to be yet, settled me. I leaned my forehead against his for a second, just breathing him in. Stay, I said, but just stay. His shoulders relaxed. Okay. We kicked off our shoes, moved to the couch. There was a careful choreography to it, like we were both aware this was new territory. The TV was on, some mindless show neither of us really watched. At some point, I shifted, resting my head against his shoulder without asking. He didn't move, didn't tense, just tilted slightly so I was more comfortable. That did something to me I hadn't expected. You're different from what I imagined, I said quietly. He glanced down at me. Good or bad? Good, I said. Just different. He considered that. You're not what I imagined either. I laughed softly. That's comforting. We sat like that for a while, the city noise filtering in through the windows. I felt his breathing slow, steady, safe, which was ironic, considering how uneasy he'd made me feel at the beginning. Or maybe not ironic at all. You know, I said, when I realized you were watching me, I thought it was about control. His jaw tightened slightly. I was afraid you would. But now, I continued, it feels more like patience. He exhaled. I didn't want to scare you away. You didn't, I said, then added honestly, you scared me a little. He nodded. Fair. Instead, I found myself asking, what happens Monday? He didn't hesitate. We're still coworkers. We're still respectful. And if at any point you want this to stop, it stops. And if I don't? Then we keep talking, he said. We keep choosing each other. That word again. Choosing. Okay, I said. He smiled, genuine and unguarded in a way I hadn't seen before. We stayed there until it got late, until the show ended and neither of us noticed. When he finally stood to leave, he didn't linger in the doorway this time. Text me when you wake up, he said. I will. And when the door closed behind him, the apartment felt different, not empty, just changed. Lying in bed later, I realized something that made me laugh quietly to myself. Adam hadn't stopped watching me. He'd just stopped doing it from a distance. And somehow, letting him closer felt far more dangerous and far more real than anything that had come before. Monday came faster than I wanted it to. I woke up to a text from Adam, just like he'd asked. Adam, morning. I smiled into my pillow before replying. Me, morning. You survived the night? Adam, barely. That made me laugh and the tension eased a little. At work, though, it came rushing back the second I stepped off the elevator. We were back in that shared space. Desks, fluorescent lights, other people. All the things that made Friday night feel like it might have been a private bubble that could pop if we weren't careful. Adam handled it exactly how he said he would. Professional. Calm. Normal. Too normal, almost. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought nothing had changed. But every time he passed my desk, every time he said my name in that even tone, I felt it underneath the awareness, the restraint, the choice we were both actively making. At one point, I caught him glancing my way and quickly looking back at his screen. That tiny slip felt more intimate than anything else. At lunch, he didn't sit with me. That surprised me and, if I was honest, stung a little. But when I checked my phone, there was a message waiting. Adam, didn't want to put you in an awkward spot. Dinner tonight? I stared at it, then typed back. Me, yeah, I'd like that. That evening felt different from Friday. Less charged, maybe, but deeper. Like we weren't just reacting anymore. We were choosing to show up again. We walked through a small park near my place. The air cool, the city quieter than usual. Adam told me about his last job, about moving cities, about how hard it was for him to connect with people without overthinking everything. I don't usually get fixated, he said, staring ahead. When I do, I notice everything. It's a lot. I glanced at him. You worried that'll scare me off? He nodded once. A little. I stopped walking. He turned to face me, immediately alert. Did I say something wrong? No, I said. I just wanted you to hear this part clearly. I stepped closer, close enough that he had to look down at me. I'm not scared of your intensity, I said. I just need honesty and boundaries. And you've been good about both. His shoulders dropped, relief visible. I can do that. I know, I said. You already are. We ended up back at my place again. This time more relaxed, more certain. We cooked together, badly laughed when I burned the garlic, argued over music. Later, as he stood to leave, he hesitated. I'm glad you didn't push me away, he said. I met his eyes. I'm glad you gave me the choice. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't being observed. I was being chosen, and I was choosing him right back. The shift didn't announce itself all at once. It crept in through small things. Adam started bringing me coffee, not every day, not in a way anyone could clock as a pattern. Just sometimes. Always remembered how I took it. I started saving him a seat in meetings without thinking about it. We synced calendars before making plans, not because we had to, but because it felt considerate. At work, we were careful. Too careful, maybe, but there was something grounding about having this quiet, steady thing running underneath the routine of emails and deadlines. Like a low note holding the melody together. One afternoon, I caught a coworker glancing between us with a curious look. Do we look obvious? I asked Adam later, when we were alone near the copy room. He considered it. Only if someone's paying attention. I snorted. Great. That's your specialty. He smiled. I've retired. Liar. Friday night we stayed in. No bars. No noise. Just takeout and a movie neither of us really watched. I watched his hand more than the screen. You okay? He asked, noticing. Yeah, I said. Just getting used to this version of you. He tilted his head. This version. The one who doesn't feel like he's holding himself at arm's length anymore. He was quiet for a moment. Then, that's because I don't feel like I have to. That hit deeper than I expected. I turned to face him. You know you can still pull back if you need to. I know, he said. That's why I don't feel the urge to. I leaned in, resting my forehead against his shoulder. He shifted instantly, accommodating me without comment. The familiarity of that of being adjusted for, not around made my chest ache in a good way. You ever worry this'll get messy? I asked. Yeah, he said honestly, but I'd rather deal with messy than regret. I smiled. You're surprisingly emotionally competent for someone who used to lurk in hallways. He laughed softly. I prefer to think of it as premature interest. Sure, I said. We'll go with that. Later, as he was getting ready to leave, he paused at the door. Eric, he said, can I ask you something kind of unfair? I raised an eyebrow. You're on a roll tonight. What made you say yes? He asked. Back then, when you could have shut this down. I thought about it. The discomfort, the curiosity, the choice. Because you listened, I said finally. The moment I asked you to stop, you did. And then you waited for me to move. He nodded slowly, like he was filing that away. I'm glad you did, he said. So am I. After he left, I sat on the couch longer than necessary, letting the quiet settle. It occurred to me then that what we had wasn't dramatic or explosive or fueled by uncertainty anymore. It was steady, which, strangely, felt more vulnerable than anything else. Because being wanted was one thing, but being known and still chosen was something else entirely. And as I turned off the lights and headed to bed, one thought lingered, calm and certain. Whatever this was becoming, we weren't circling each other anymore. We were walking forward, together. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, which felt fitting somehow. No dramatic build-up. No big confession scene. Just a quiet realization that had been forming for weeks. We were at my place again. Shoes kicked off by the door. Rain tapping softly against the windows. Adam was standing in my kitchen, sleeves rolled up, washing dishes I hadn't even asked him to touch. He moved like he belonged there, not claiming the space, just fitting into it. I leaned against the counter, watching him without hiding it this time. He noticed. Of course he did. What? He asked, glancing over his shoulder. I smiled. Nothing. Just noticing. He dried his hands slowly, turned to face me. There was no tension in his posture now. No holding back. Just calm attention. That used to scare you, he said. It did, I admitted. I thought being seen meant being exposed. And now it feels like being understood, he said quietly. I don't need to watch you anymore. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, I know you, he said. And you let me. That was it. That was the moment. I stepped forward and rested my hands against his chest, feeling his heartbeat under my palms. Steady. Familiar. I choose you, I said. Not dramatic, not whispered, just true. His breath caught. Not in shock. In relief. I've been choosing you for a while, he said. I was just waiting for you to say it out loud. Later, lying beside him, the rain still falling outside, I thought about how this had started, and how strange it was that the thing I'd feared most had led me here. Adam hadn't stopped noticing me. He'd learned how to notice with me instead of from afar. There was no grand promise about the future, no dramatic vows, just the quiet understanding that tomorrow would come and we'd wake up and choose each other again. And for the first time, that felt like more than enough. Because love didn't sneak up on me, paid attention.